thank you for your informative talk. Okay, here's my question. Yep. My name's Kieran Howard from the PIP Management Committee. Okay, the New South Wales government is considering allowing the world's largest energy from waste incinerator to be built in Eastern Creek. This incinerator will produce amounts of extremely toxic pollution, seriously detrimental to the health of the local residents. Do you consider this plan to build a great, big, ugly and extremely toxic incinerator in Western Sydney, demographically classified as an area of low to medium wealth, Sydney's backyard in fact, to paraphrase Dial-a Dump CEO Christopher Biggs, an environmental and a social justice, social class issue? In other words, do you think that our political masters and their big business mates arrogantly consider the residents of Western Sydney as second-class citizens and Western Sydney itself a dumping ground for the state's waste disposal problems? That's my first question. My second, and does the construction of this incinerator, the world's largest, an example of old technology which actually creates a demand for waste instead of, like in other countries, going to the source of the problem, the waste itself, at the point of its production? In other words, the incinerator will act as a disincentive for industry at the manufacturing stage to produce materials that can be reused, repaired, recycled and or composted in line with best practice in other developed countries.
As I said in my talk earlier anyway, absolutely. I think if this incinerator gets built, then it will create an incentive for more and more waste to be burnt in the incinerator, rather than us thinking of much more sustainable alternatives as to avoiding producing waste in the first instance and then trying to reuse it before we even go to recycling. Because I think recycling as well uses a lot of energy, to be really frank. So we have to really move to the end of avoiding. And we know in European countries and in Canada, in fact, I think Toyota takes back the cars because there are incentives and there are regulations to make sure that there is extended producer responsibility. And that's really when they start thinking about making things with less material so it doesn't cost them too much when those products are returned to them. So I can't agree with you more. On the second question, very quickly, Antony can answer most of that. This government will go to great lengths, and we see it happen every day in Parliament, to talk the talk on Western Sydney. They care about the people of Western Sydney. That's why they're building the West Connects, for instance. Yeah, a toll road, exactly. So their their justification is that people won't have to sit in cars for hours, and quickly their journey times will be reduced, and they completely disregard the fact that how much more money it's going to cost those people. But also the pollution, as Antony said, pollution is not just going to come from burning waste, but more cars on roads cause more pollution. And just to give you a fact, over the last some years, in every OECD country except Australia, air pollution has actually improved. In Australia, deaths due to air pollution have increased by quite a significant amount, and most of that air pollution is actually related to cars on roads and trucks on roads. So yeah, I agree that it is partly an issue of class, that they can dump everything on Western Sydney and it'll all be fine.
So I'll talk to the Western Sydney. To be honest, a lot of people go, my God, you've got so many people active in Western Sydney to an issue. And to a point, I live in Mount Druitt and I work in Rooty Hill, so I live close, so I didn't have the problem that most of the people in Western Sydney have, which is they, as well as the 8 to 10 hour day that most people do, they've got an hour and a half to 2 hour commute each direction. So you're exhausted. They go home and they just wake up the next morning effectively. So yes, Western Sydney is easy fodder for them. That's what they think. So the Minister for Western Sydney is a man called Mr. Stuart Ayres. He's the Penrith, is where he is. There's rallies. We go monthly to rally to his place. We're having a big rally on the 21st of October. and we're rallying for no M4 tolls, West Connects, the airport, we're also no BCA, and concerned residents of Western Sydney, and the no incinerator for Western Sydney against the incinerator. He is not delivering. He does not care. And to your point, the Liberal Party themselves do think this is the dumping ground. They do believe that if they put money into arts and sports, give Penrith Panthers something, give the Jones Sutherland Stadium a bit of an upgrade, give the Parramatta Stadium a bit of an upgrade for Para Eels fans, they're sorted. You know, that's just, you know, it reminds me of the Romans and using the Colosseum to get, you know, the plebs. That this is the slaves. This is very poor style of politics, and really Gladys needs to go, change your attitude or we'll change you.
Jefferson Lee, the convener of the anti-conscription plebiscite Vote No centenary from 1917 to 2017, which will be commemorated here in this very venue upstairs at the Gaelic Club, 64 Devonshire Street, Surrey Hills, on Sunday, December the 3rd, between 3 and 7, with one of the leading activists on all these issues, Sonia Bennett, hopefully performing. And I'm also the convener of the Stop Sydney Transport Users Opposing Privatisation of Government Buses and Trains, which we attempted to convince the Greens and other progressive forces to campaign on the north side and the east side instead of just in the inner west, because they're all under assault, all of our government public transport services remaining, so we can keep a public transport system in the east, north and inner west. Now, my question you partly answered, but I heard you say the magic word related to dioxin as part of one of the pollutions coming out of this, and you also said you're a resident of Mount Druitt. Back in 1982, the National Times had a story of 7 Vietnam veteran families, all in Wayland, all living in the one street, and 5 of them had birth defects in their kids as a result of being victims of Agent Orange dioxin spraying. And that's who the beneficiaries will be for December the 3rd here. But specifically, how are you going to convince the rest of Sydney to get involved because of this massive division down that Parramatta road link between east and west? Can you conscript some eastern suburb sporting personalities along with some western suburb sporting personalities to appear at Stuart Ayres' office in your rally to undercut this bread and circuses, let's build a new stadium thing, and maybe some doctors from Westmead Hospital, and maybe some doctors from the Prince of Wales Hospital. Let's get over this east-west divide in Sydney by recruiting known identities from the, you know, latte-sipping, avocado-crushing belt to come out and speak at Penrith and be proud of uniting Sydney as one city. That's my question underlying it. And secondly, in councils in Victoria, they have had decomposable plastic bags for the last decade and a half in local rubbish and local service stations, and those perforated cups you get in every service station in Sydney, they're non-decomposable. And what about jute bags from Sri Lanka and other, you know, decomposable, compostable plastic bags? When are we going to move away from this, you know, non-decompostable produce going into our garbage? And I won't point to the plastic cups on the tables because there aren't any. Thank you.
I'll start with the whole concept of waste. All right. Just so you know, I went to this UR3R facility this morning, which happens to be near Eastern Creek there, which is urban recycle, reduce, reuse, something, the 3 Rs. Given that, the first thing is there are things to do before you even bother about using something. There's redesign and refuse. So refusing plastic bags is a good start for everyone. We can do it now, all right? And in fact, I don't buy disposable coffee. If I'm going to have a coffee, I sit down and I enjoy it with a ceramic cup and done, all right? So everyone can do that wherever you live. You don't have to be east, west, or whatever. And so let's start by doing our own bit individually. And yes, to that point, the ABC story, which just explained, just understand, a lot of this waste we're talking to is called construction and demolition waste, or commercial industrial waste. So it's not the municipal waste that us as individuals, when we consume, make, all right? They're actually doing a pretty good job, or they're starting to along the way. But construction and demolition waste right now is, they build buildings. We're in a building boom. Right now we're in a building boom, yet how much of that is recycled? All right, how do you make sure it's recycled? Look at this carpet, all right? I'll tell you a quick story about a company called Interface Carpets, second biggest carpet company in the world, based over in the UK. I'm in the US. They now make carpet tiles rather than broadloom carpets, because firstly, only repair and replace the ones where people walk. All right. The second thing is you can separate the rubber substrate from the patterned top. You can separate them. You can recycle, reuse, do something with them. Broadloom carpets go the wrong way. You can do the same with curtains. People need to understand and do the right thing. When it comes to, say, a plastic water bottle, I'm not very into the plastic water bottles. I have my aluminium little thing that I use. But Coles actually have rPET, which is reused PET, all right? That means that they've taken PET that's gone through the waste stream, reusing it to make new PET. So rPET, it's called. Look at that. Consider that. So that's all to that level. When it comes to it, we all can do our bit, all right? And that's, I think that I'll just leave it at that to answer your questions.
I might just quickly add that in terms of plastics, I think that is one of the most dangerous material that ends up in our waste streams and in our oceans as well. And the way that it's affecting marine life is really horrendous and disastrous. So the Greens, obviously, we've had a bill for 2 years in Parliament now to ban single-use plastic bags, which many other states in Australia have done. It's not even a new thing. But New South Wales government refuses to do it, because again, they are much more heavily influenced and much more closer to big business and big industry than I think other governments might be. So it is pretty sad, but I think what Antony said is right. If the governments won't do it, we have to take things in our own hands and individually act on it.
My name's Ken Cregan. There's one good sign. I went to Beecroft today and Woolworths opened a new supermarket and no plastic bags.
And could I say that's a campaign that was run by our new councillor there, Emma Heidi, and she basically ran for months a campaign speaking to shops there who all committed to not using plastic bags.
Yeah. A great talk, but the question is, have you given some thought to spoon feeding our politicians? They've got a problem. They've got all this waste. They've got to find something to do with it. And it seems to me like it's a three-part process. You need to buy time, because they're going to move quickly on this incinerator. So you need to spoon feed them with an alternative proposal. And so the question is, have you done this? And this proposal has one part, needs somewhere to put the rubbish to start with, the waste to start with, holes in the ground. Have you got an inventory of all the holes in the ground?
Underground coal mines, no longer used. We've been doing it for 30 years.
Yes.
And it's leaching into the water supply.
Well, coal mines, but there's a quarry at Hornsby, enormous quarry. It could take a lot of fill, probably give you enough time. Have you done an inventory of all the holes where this stuff could be buried? Secondly, you talked about analysis, you don't know what the waste is. You need to know this. This is pretty important. So you need to be conducting an analysis of what it all is. And thirdly, then your long-term policy as to, once you know what it is, what you're going to do with it in a future like 5 years off. And have you worked out an alternative plan to spoon-feed the politicians so that, because they're looking for an easy way out, to help them to make this. For example, PCs could be broken up into modules. They all need the same plus and minus 12 volts and 5 volts DC, and yet they supply new ones every PC. That could be all modularised. Have you taken into account what they're doing with software? The likes of Microsoft and other companies are getting very cunning with software through licensing because they want to keep selling you the same thing over and over again. So they make their main operating system only last at 10 years at best, and then it becomes defunct. And what's more, the hardware won't work. You have to upgrade your hardware and your software, and they need to be disconnected so you can go on. Even printers have chips in them, so you have to keep on getting new cartridges, more landfill. So they're my questions. What are your plans, please?
So in terms of spoon-feeding government, well, yeah, exactly. Well, we've been trying to give them as much evidence as possible to try to make the decisions. The problem is that the current government is not wanting to look at evidence. They are stuck in their very narrow political agenda, and it's really hard. But one way that I've seen in Parliament when politicians of all sides come out of their narrow political agendas is the committee process. So we've used that quite well in terms of inquiries. So the current inquiry that I'm sitting on waste is going to explore all of those questions and hopefully come up with some good recommendations. In terms of data, I mean, it's impossible for me as a Greens MP to go out and collect data. It's the EPA's job, and they haven't been doing their job. So our job is basically to make sure that the regulator does their job. And that's what we kind of tried to do in terms of budget estimates just a few weeks ago. Yeah, we have been. That's what I'm saying. We have been. Like every single day we've been putting questions. This is what we question them in budget estimates. And I have to say that the pressure that the community has been putting in Western Sydney is having a major effect. Because I questioned Stuart Ayres, the Minister for Western Sydney, and I asked him whether he supported the incinerator proposal. And I was expecting him to say, oh, you know, we'll have to wait and see, blah, blah. But he said to me quite openly, on that day anyway, that he did not support the incinerator. So we've got to that stage where a minister is saying he doesn't support it, but obviously he said it's going through the planning process and we'll see what happens. So I think things will only change if the community really stand up and in a loud voice, which they are doing at the moment, but I think we need many more loud voices to join the No Incinerator group, because that's the only thing that scares governments, because their ultimate game is to win the next election. And, you know, I mean, sadly, that's not the way that I think. Of course, I'm in politics, and obviously, you know, we want to win as well, but that's not the end game. The end game, actually, is to create a better, fairer, more equal, sustainable society. And while doing that, if you can get the votes, that's brilliant. But the end game is not winning the election.
Yeah, I totally agree. And political pressure is absolute and paramount. And I didn't talk to it, but when we looked at our power map and we worked out where we're going to be, that we personally, this thing should have stopped already. I don't get it. I've told you guys, you get it, but I can't. I told lots of people. I tell everyone. Don't worry about that. That won't stop it. Logic will not stop this thing from going ahead. And in fact, even Stuart Ayres saying he's against it, and Tanya Davies, who's a minister as well, but she's in the state parliament and it's in her electorate. She says she's against it. She's got a little petition. That won't stop it either, because they use the word independent process through the Department of Planning. So if everyone says it's no good, do you know what the next step is? it's called a PAC, all right? It's a Planning and Assessment Commission. And then they get generally 2 or 3, probably 3, you know, because there's going to be a lot of us talking to them. And they'll put them up, whoever they are, independent, but they select who they are. And then we get to talk to them, all right? And we tell them this whole story again. And we try to explain it because they come from an independent starting point. And they could still approve this. All right? And if anyone who watched the news and saw Gladys, she says, we need the process, and then I may intervene. She can't intervene after that. We can't. It's because the way it's set in the law, not from Cert 4, what was it, Part 4A, the old rules, we could get involved again. It was legal, you could say, hey, go again. No, once it goes to a Planning Assessment Commission, there is no legal recompense. We can't go back and go, oh, no, this was wrong, No, he gets to go. He gets to do it. And if they then legislate against it, he gets a big money, all right? And he gets this money and goes, oh, yeah, okay, I don't care. I got money, because that's what he thinks about, money. Money's success. Not society, not building a better community, not the waste. He doesn't give a crap about the waste itself. That's just money. And depending on how much he can get for it, he'll do whatever he can to make more money out of making money, right? And so just that point. You mentioned designed obsolescence and how they go with that. And to your point, we let them do it. You know, some people, like, my phone keeps telling me that a Samsung something or other is coming out next week and I could go and pre-order it, you know. You don't have to do that. So just please stop and tell everyone to stop buying the latest gadget. We've got to slow down the design process. And I'll just mention one last thing. Back to construction and demolition waste, which is the primary waste for this facility. We need better design standards for our buildings in Australia, in New South Wales. You should not be able to build a building today that cannot be 100% recycled. All right, in some manner. And that is not the way it is right now. And you see them the way, like, they don't even try to make it recycle or cut it in bits and reuse it or anything like that. Bam, throw it down, get rid of it, get that bigger building up, you know, and so there's a big problem there. Remember that it's hard when you're talking to people to try and convince people to behaviourally change, but this is business-to-business transaction when it comes to construction and demolition waste. And that is an easier, manageable process. And we need to get into that. So consider, you have to take it all personally, but at the same time, make sure that commercial industrial, which is cars, PCs, all that, and construction, which is buildings waste, is made better and designed better now. Because we're building right now stuff that we can bloody have to do something with.
My name's Holger Kofod. Now, I remember the old Rand government, Labor, very popular one in its time, decided to build a toxic waste incinerator in the watershed for Prospect Reservoir. 80,000 people protested, and even Neville Rand decided it was time to change his mind. Now, 1994, South Sydney Council invited an American waste expert, Dr. Paul Connett, to come out and speak against the Waterloo incinerator. Now, a couple of years later, for some reason, the incinerator stopped producing smoke. Now, a few years ago, Paul Connett, he was out here campaigning against fluoride. Well, that campaign was a disaster, complete flop, because it wasn't advertised. Now, Paul Connett, highly qualified chemist, he's written 2 books, The Case Against Fluoride and The Toxic, the Zero Waste Solution. Now, what is the chance of getting Dr. Connett to come out and campaign against fluoride and wastes.
Have you got a check to write for us? Like honestly, the truth of the matter is, yeah, if we qualify everyone because everyone says they do good things. So if he came out, that would be brilliant. If he was appropriate. So I'll ask you to write his details down, and we'll speak to him. At the same time, we're currently, as the West Sydney, the No Incinerator for Western Sydney group, are speaking to professors about air quality in Western Sydney and what the analysis is. We're speaking to the Environmental Justice Network. We're talking to the National Toxics Network, the NTN, which is I mentioned in my talk, Jane Bremer, but there's others in it, of course. Through there, we're networking with Europe, all right, and all the incinerator groups over there. Like these, I think they said 2,200 incinerators in Europe, and no one has a problem. There are lots of problems. I haven't even mentioned the fact that they have fires, all right? They burn and they shut down and they have a few issues. So they're not actually very reliable, some of them. Let's say I'm not saying they all aren't, but there's lots of other issues. But to your point, as a specific point, as a group, and I'll talk about the group, of course we will. We will listen, we want to make sure we're open to say we'd actually even be willing to talk to Mr. Malouf, HZI and all that if they had a solution. But they don't give us good data. They rely on consultants who they've paid who aren't giving them good data. And I have a hard time discussing with them. I'm an engineer with a production background. I can read their material better than Mr. Malouf. And it's bad. It's wrong. So, I get it.
No,
do you want to say?
I think is that?
Oh, yeah,
we're
but
finished.
I just
You
want
want
to make a statement.
Okay, so you want to wrap up?
So I'm going to make a quick statement because I've got a few people here because we go out and advocate all the time. One is, please sign our petitions. Now, we've got them, and I know that Jan sent them around. There's an upper house and a lower house inquiry, and we want to get both. And we're going to put it out there and get it done. Secondly, you can write to Gladys. You can write to the Premier. You can go on a page. You won't get a good reply, but you can just say, hey, I saw this in politics in the pub. Our air quality is bad. You're not managing it well. And please, do something about it. The more the merrier. The diverse nature. She will get scared when the East start talking to me. No, I shouldn't say that. I used to live over in Maroubra. It's not as if the East and West, but I'll just bring it up. All right? And the last one I want to bring up is the EPA. The EPA is the dark horse in the room. The EPA are not doing their job. A lot of people have talked to that. They should be leading us. They should be a shining light. They should be able to tell us how it all goes. They should tell us, where's the air quality good between them and the OEH. They should be telling us how to do recycling well. They should be doing it. I'm sorry, but they're not leading. They're lagging. They're reactionary. And it's clear from the investigations being done to date that they're not delivering. Now, is that to the individual? I don't know. I think it's in the culture, and I think it's in under-resourcing. So it's both from government and from the individual.
Did you want to wrap up at all, Mehreen? You're right. Okay, so I've actually given a one more announcement for next Sunday, which is this coming Sunday, the 24th of September. That's right, isn't it? For a picnic. There's a picnic at the Sydney Park Camp next to the Davidson Oval between 12 and 4 p.m. And that's about WestConnex.
The first anniversary of the blockade camp.
Yeah. So that's Sydney Park Camp next to Davidson Oval, 12 to 4 p.m. on Sunday. And they're saying all are welcome. So thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I think it's been a fantastic talk and two great speakers. And what we will try and do is send this out on Facebook. It'll go on our Facebook page. And then, of course, Antony and Mehreen, you can use it as you want to use it. Yeah, to get it out there. So next week, we have a topic is a younger generation's perspective on social justice issues. We've got Isabella Brooke from Sydney University SRC. As I think it's Iceland's, I think that's Ashley. I don't know how you pronounce that. Stein McGee, so president of the SRC, University of New South Wales, and Hersha Kadkol, Palestinian student from Socialist Alliance. They're coming to speak about what a younger generation thinks about social justice issues and what they're concerned about. So I hope you all come next Thursday, and in the meantime, have a wonderful week. Okay, bye.